Furthermore, I deduced that God's way had to be for all people, for all times. No one was special, no one was chosen, no one was excluded. None of us alive, those who had gone before us, nor those who would come after. I couldn't believe in a merciful God if he hadn't made his religion known to mankind from the beginning of time. Somehow, back at the beginning, since the creation of Adam, I knew there had to be a secret. Something I had missed from the beginning and which was the key to everything. There were problems in my family. My brother, younger than me, was already an alcoholic. He was mentally unstable and prone to fits of rage. My mother, however, always took his side in any confrontation. She was extremely stressed. I had to drop out of university because I couldn't concentrate properly on my studies. I also hated having to leave my daughter at nursery school to attend classes. I wanted to look after her full-time. My grandfather got worse every day. Early one morning after my mother left for work, he set fire to his chair by dropping a lit cigarette between the cushions. I thought I was dreaming when I heard the smoke alarm ring in the house. Not even the acrid smell of smoke woke me up. It was my daughter calling, "Mommy, Mommy," that finally got me up and out of bed. I opened my bedroom door and saw a house full of smoke. I grabbed my daughter out of her crib, woke up my brother, and we left the house. The fire department arrived, but by then my brother had already carried the burning chair into the garden. First he had to get my grandfather out of the way, because he was sitting on the floor in front of the chair, trying to put out the fire by hitting the chair with a ruler. It was obvious that my grandfather now needed more supervision than any of us could give. It was at this time that my mother began to think seriously about putting him in a nursing home. Then my services would no longer be needed. She told me in no uncertain terms that I had to move out. There was no place for me or my daughter in her life. Without Grandpa to worry about and my brother going out to get drunk most of the time, my mother found she had more time to spend in privacy with her boyfriend. She felt it was time to live her life the way she wanted. She was petrified. My husband and I were still in the process of getting divorced. I couldn't get welfare while I was still married to him. If I tried, they would go after him first for child support, something I hadn't seen a penny of. He threatened me by saying that if I tried to get alimony from him, he would fight for custody of our daughter. His mistress was behind it, encouraging him. I didn't know how I could survive unless I got a job. And that meant putting my daughter in daycare again. It was agony to feel so alone and with no solution in sight. I was beginning to feel as if I was the only sane person in the midst of all the insanity, although sometimes I even questioned it. It felt like a square peg being put into a round hole. I didn't seem to fit into the family after my grandmother died and was slowly being pushed out of it altogether. In desperation, I turned to God again, begging for answers to my problems. One day I found myself alone at home. My daughter was with her father and my mother and brother had gone somewhere. In the silence of my room, I felt the urge to pray. But how? I stopped in the middle of my room without knowing where to start. I stopped as if I were listening, trying to find some guidance in this simple matter of how to pray. The idea came to me that in order to talk to God, I had to be clean. As if seized by a force beyond my control, I went into the bathroom to take a shower. I showered from head to toe. On returning to my room, I once again stood waiting for something or someone to tell me what to do next. Once again, I was guided towards the answer. I felt the need to cover up, completely. Wearing an ankle-length long-sleeved robe wasn't enough. I felt I had to cover my hair too. I wrapped a long scarf around my head and looked in the mirror, feeling strangely comfortable with my appearance. And although I had no idea what a Muslim woman was or how she dressed, there I was, basically wearing the hijab. Anyone who knew Islam would have thought I was a Muslim preparing for prayer. But glory be to God, at that time I still didn't know anything about Islam. So there I was, dressed for prayer and with no idea what to do next. I turned to the window and stood there, looking out at that sunny day. What would come next? I didn't want to kneel, it was too much like church. I felt I needed to be humble before Him. I wanted to be in a position of complete submission to my Creator. Remember that word submission, it's important. The only idea in my mind was to lie down on the floor. Again, it conjured up images of the church, when future priests and nuns would take their vows and lie on the floor, arms outstretched at their sides, basically in the shape of a cross. As much as I wanted to humble myself completely before my Creator, I had no idea how to do it. Finally, the thought came to me that I should kneel down and put my face to the ground. Before doing so, however, I realized that the floor might not be clean enough, and although my room was clean, I felt the need to prostrate myself on something that I could be sure was pure. Next to my daughter's crib was a small blanket I had crocheted for her baby carriage. It was, I realized later, exactly the size of an Islamic prayer rug. And it was freshly washed, so I took the blanket and laid it in front of me on the carpet. And surprisingly, I learned later that it was the exact direction of the Kaaba, the direction Muslims turn to for prayer. Satisfied that all was well, I bent my knees, rested my upper body on my hands and put my face to the floor. I get tears in my eyes and a shiver runs through my body when I remember that day. I see myself in that room, in that position, and realize that I was clearly dressed and praying like a Muslim. Subhanallah. Allah is free from all imperfection. How merciful God was to guide me like that. In that position, feeling as if I had finally connected with God, I cried and begged Him several times to show me the way He wanted me to believe, the way He wanted me to live. The tears wouldn't stop. I finally felt like I had found a greater truth that day. I just needed to fill in the gaps. And thanks to the guidance and mercy of my glorious Lord, I would soon find all the answers. As my mother continued to consider a nursing home for my grandfather and I was still forced to look for a new place to live, Thanksgiving arrived and I was still at home.